Fantastic. Okay, let me make sure my sound is on the right output. It's my turn to speak. Okay. I wasn't exactly sure how I wanted to start this, but there's a lot of debate topics that you can talk about, from religion to politics, where there really isn't an objective, correct answer. It's going to be subjective no matter what. You're never going to get to a concrete answer, especially with things like religion, where it requires that you have something that for a lot of people is concrete, especially if you're an anti-theist like Christopher Hitchens was, where you don't want to believe in it, even if it was true. With feminism, it is objectively not a good thing. And I hope to at least shed some light on why I think that, and why I think that it is so problematic, and it does nothing to help anyone, and in fact, only increases tensions and issues. I had all of my books out here, and I wasn't exactly sure. One of the things that people talk about a lot, especially with the suffragette movement and the early movement in the 1900s, especially early 1900s, was the fact that women didn't have this freedom that men had. And men helped free women while enslaving themselves. And the fact that you're laughing at that shows you have no real knowledge of history. Almost all the fatalities in history were male, especially when it comes to war. And men were the ones who, in certain wars like the Great War in Britain, feminists and suffragettes actually shamed men into not dying for their country. They would give them something called a white feather. And if you'd like, I can provide sources for all this. But they would go in public to men who weren't wearing uniform, and they would shame them into trying to go into war and die. And it was basically all this propaganda, but it came from feminists, and it came from feminist campaigns. So this white feather movement to shame men into dying is something that was going on long time ago. And this idea that women have always been oppressed and men have always been oppressors are people who don't understand what a caste system was, and don't understand that we live in an oligarchy and not a patriarchy. So I'm not exactly sure. I'm not used to starting these things. So I just wanted to state where I'm at on the map right now. And I'm very curious as to what.
Okay. Is this like working? All right. Well, I mean, first off, like I literally just read Aristotle's Politics and would agree that we are in an oligarchy. But I, however, don't think that is it's not like mutually exclusive. You can be in an oligarchy and a patriarchy, because by being in an oligarchy, meaning that there's a certain elite group that is ruling. Who is it? I mean, it's men. And also about the whole being in war and men dying. Yeah, that's absolutely true. More men have certainly died in wars and fighting for their nations than women have. Why is that true? Because women weren't allowed to fight. So I don't know why you would anticipate anything more if throughout history women weren't historically allowed to participate in war. And yeah, I'm sure that these suffragettes were warring or hoping that men would go to war, but that's not like, I want men to die. It's, you need to fight for our country. We as women can't fight for our country, so we need someone to do it. I don't understand that at all. And for just feminism in general being something that's outdated and unnecessary, I can understand totally that from the perspective of a white male living in America, it would seem that feminism isn't necessary, because American women, especially white American women, have made leaps and bounds in terms of equality, and that's certainly true. However, feminism literally only means men and women having equal political, economic, and social rights. I don't understand how that's something that can be debated. And yeah, I mean, just because we've made strides towards equality does not mean in any means that feminism is unnecessary or outdated.
Wow, that was an impressive amount of logical fallacies in what? That was about 2 minutes. That was impressive. All right, well, I guess I'll start with the ad hominem. You attacked you made a sexist and racist statement. You said because I'm a white male that I wouldn't understand certain things. Well, I'll have you know, I've not to use these as bragging tools, but I mean, if apparently I have to validate my victimhood to prove that I'm able to discuss this subject and not just philosophically think about it, I've been raped by a woman. I was sexually assaulted. I've been jumped by 5 or 6 people with a machete. I have also had myself I was homeless for years, just on and off. And this fucking stupid ass mentality from people like yourself who feel like they can somehow say to somebody that they don't know, oh, because of your race and your gender, you just wouldn't understand. That is the most sexist and racist bullshit that you're saying you're fighting. Oh, as a feminist, you know, we care about equality. But when you're a white male, you just don't understand what equality is because you've never experienced inequality. And that is a profound level of ignorance and self-victimhood that I can't understand as somebody who is a victim of a lot of different things. And I would never say to a woman, because you're a woman, you don't understand what it's like to have your genitals mutilated as a child, because you don't. You grew up in America and you're a woman, so you didn't have your clit cut off. I had myself circumcised against my will as an infant. And I wouldn't say to you that you don't understand genital mutilation, even though you don't, and I objectively do, more than you. But I would never presume to say that maybe that wasn't true of you, because maybe you did grow up in a country where that happened and that horrifically happened to you. The fact that you're willing to attack my character instead of attack my arguments just shows that feminism relies on an ignorance and a contempt of men. Like you phrased it yourself when I said, let's have this debate. You said, feminism isn't about hating men. Well, it sure as hell sounds like it is. I mean, the fact that you say that we live in an oligarchy, but we can also live in a patriarchy, when, as far as statistics go, let's see here. Men pay 97% of alimony. Men make up 94% of work suicides. Men make up 93% of workplace fatalities. 79% of all suicides are men. 78% of all homicide victims are male. Men are over twice as victimized by strangers than women. 82% of the prison population is male, and men are 165% more likely to be convicted than women. Men also get 63% longer sentences than women for the same crime, and court bias against men is 6 times larger than racial bias. Men also get arrested in 85% of all domestic violence cases, but it's estimated that women are the perpetrators in most domestic violence cases. Most reciprocal violence is started by women, and 70% of non-reciprocal violence is perpetrated by women. Women, however, only get arrested in 50% of all domestic violence arrests. And despite these numbers, 99.3% of domestic violence shelters are exclusively for women. So your ignorant mentality of the real issues that affect our society, when the vast majority of them affect men, and to attack me on a racial and gender level, I feel like you've proven my point for me, that feminism has nothing to do with equality and everything to do with superiority and ignorance based on, well, this victim mentality that must give you. Why can I not pass the mic?
Okay, it came to me. But anyways, I just have the question of if you think reverse racism.
I would like you to address. I can't hear you. What do you? It's your turn. I'm not answering your question until you address the points I just made. I'm using my time. I'm not using any more of my time right now until you use some of your time to address the points I just made. Because all you've done is use logical fallacies to try to debunk something or tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about because of my skin color or my genitals. So I'd like you to address those points instead of constantly trying to pass
I'm literally not trying to pass the mic. I don't know what's happening with the technical issues, but it's not on. Anyways, the reason I ask you about reverse racism is because your first point was that I was attacking you on the basis of race and gender. So the point being that I was attacking you for being white. I'm not attacking you for being white. However, reverse racism does not exist. It doesn't exist. You can't be racist against a white person. I don't want to go into that because this is about feminism, but that's the truth, is that reverse racism doesn't exist because historically, white people, people of European descent, have had opportunities in America and worldwide that have not been given to people of color. They have been the oppressors. Reverse racism doesn't exist. Anyways, addressing the points, I understand your point that about male suicides in the workplace. However, at the same time, women don't have equality in the workplace and they don't have economic equality. They don't make up a majority of the workforce. If they do, 2/3 of women make up minimum wage jobs. 3/4 of those jobs are tipping jobs where the minimum cash wage is $2.13 an hour. They get women who even are in the private sector in the working force. White women get paid 78 cents to a man's dollar. Black women, 64 cents. Hispanic women and Latina women, 54 cents to a man's dollar. So, I mean, even in workplace affairs, despite the fact that men are at a higher risk of suicide, that doesn't have to do with equality in the workplace. Because women still don't have the advantages that men have in making wages and providing a life for themselves. 60% of the world's poorest people are women worldwide. So if we don't need feminism because men are committing suicide due to workplace complications or issues, women aren't even getting jobs.
Okay, well, it seems unfortunate that you didn't really do any research on this, because the pay gap has been debunked by even feminists, even devout feminists like Warren Farrell and Christina Hoff Sommers, to name two. And the fact that you can't accept that is astonishing, because nobody who is respected in their field of anything to do with statistical analysis or finances would say that. The pay gap is ultimately down to women's choices. Women choose lower earning fields, and because of that, they sometimes make less. But the reason the pay gap originated was because they took the earnings from all men and all women and compared them. They didn't account for full-time or part-time. They didn't account for experience. They didn't account for maternity leave. They didn't account for education. They didn't account for any of those things. So if you just look at all men and all women, of course, because men choose to make more. Men are more taking up more engineering fields, except lately that's actually not been the case in a lot of places. Women have been doing much, much better in college. And currently, women in every field in every degree, from bachelor's, associates, doctorates, and masters, women will earn over half of those degrees every year. So the inequality in education doesn't exist unless it's towards men. And as far as the workplace goes, I would say that if, 78%? Or no, I'm sorry, 94% of workplace suicides are male. I think that that's a huge problem with workplace. And the fact that you don't understand why the wage gap isn't real and why it doesn't exist, again, it's troubling. I think you should just do a little bit of research, read a book about it. I'd suggest Why Men Earn More and What Women Can Do About It by Warren Farrell, who was a feminist and prolific author for a long time. But as far as you said, the poorest women, I need to see that. As far as 60% of the world's poorest people are women, I need to see that statistic. But even if it is true, I think that has to do with a large part of our world not having access to, birth control and things like that. So I think that when women don't have access to proper birth control and means to keep themselves from being essentially baby making machines, then I definitely can see how there would be more women in certain impoverished areas. But then again, if you look at our country, for instance, the poorest people are men, the people who are homeless are men, the people who are mostly victims of domestic violence are men, the people who are mostly raped are men. Every single statistic that you can name as far as any crime there is, the larger base is male victims. So let's see here. For every woman who is murdered, 3 men are murdered. The more violent the crime, the more likely the victim is to be a male. And forcible rape constitutes less than 6% of all violent crimes. Violent crimes in which men are the primary victims constitute the remaining 94%, even though men are also the primary victims of rape. So I'll go ahead and pass the mic back over to you, because I don't feel like you've addressed any of the points. And yes, you did say something racist earlier, and you did say something sexist earlier. And this was recorded, so you can deny it and just look like an idiot later. But you did say, because I'm a white male, I wouldn't understand, and reverse racism doesn't exist. When if I'm recognized as having a race, then you can be racist against me. And to say that because somehow my race achieved something over history, that I'm not allowed to be a victim and have bad things happen to me, or I'm not allowed to talk on the same level, I'm not a peer. Like, this ignorance, this contempt for any kind of real equality and only superiority.
Okay. Well, first to the rape statistics, because those are wildly inaccurate. 1 out of 6 women are raped in America every year. 82% of all rape victims that are juvenile are women. 90% of adult victims are women. Additionally, 20,000 people are sold into sex trade every year. 98% of those people are women. Additionally, 50% of women have experienced sexual harassment, compared to 25% of men. And the men who did experience sexual harassment often cited that as homophobic or transphobic slurs, which I completely empathize towards. And I think that people think that feminism is not male inclusive. However, when people are making homophobic and transphobic slurs, and especially when there's attacks against the LGBT community, that's definitely an intersectional feminist viewpoint, a feminist issue. Additionally, 80% of 12 to 16-year-old girls have experienced harassment in school. So those are just some statistics for you. Additionally, the survey was from the United Nations Population Fund, which stated that 60% of the world's poorest people are women. And you're right, it's because in impoverished nations, that's true. Women don't have access to birth control. Women don't have access to education. And so obviously then, yes, men worldwide are going to make up a majority of the workforce because women don't have access to the education that men are afforded. 2/3 of all illiterate adults are women. And this is obviously a problem that's faced more in other countries, you know, such as with Malala Yousafzai's entire initiative. She literally got shot trying to pursue an education. And so although America is in some ways a good example of how much women can achieve and how much equality they can achieve to be on the same level, if not surpassing men, intersectional feminism addresses worldwide and international issues, not just with cisgender white women, but women of all colors and also transgender women, and that needs to be addressed as
well, I'd like to know the facts for the statistics because they're wrong. I put in the description, or I put in the comments, a link to an article that talks about how more men are statistically raped than women in the United States. You can not accept the facts or you can deny them, but they're facts. So you have a right to your own opinions, but you don't have a right to your own facts, and you're wrong. So I'll pass the mic back to you so you can.
Okay, I got my statistics from the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Organization. I'm not going to dispute that.
Okay. Well, I'd like you to look at the statistics that I posted that regard prison rape included in the United States.
The comment is not showing up. I will gladly look at it. I'll gladly reconsider it. However, I'm going to stick by my statistics at this point. I think that arguing back and forth about numbers based on different web sources seems like an irrelevant spending of time.
Web sources. Well, these are actually pretty vast studies that are being done that show huge population sizes. And the studies you're quoting from are skewed statistics, and they're usually very small population sizes. So, and the 1 in 4 women, 1 in 5 women, 1 in 6 women, that statistic's also bullshit. The statistic that you stated about men not being harassed as much, that also is, and I brought a whole lot of material, unlike yourself, and I am perfectly happy to do this again and tell you exactly how you're wrong about every single point with facts and sources, because I love doing that. It's just fun. But again, like I said when I started this topic, you are objectively wrong about feminism being useful in the modern world. As an egalitarian, there is no need for feminism. Feminism is an outdated ideology that comes from basically the civil rights movement, where I was actually, maybe I have time to see here. There it is. It's not that I don't like men. Women are just better. A very wise friend of mine asked, have you ever noticed what passes for a terrific man would only be an adequate woman? A Roman candle went off in my head. And that is a quote from Anna Quindlen. There was a time, it is not easy now even to recall, when people said of men and women, viva la difference. The idea that life is better because both sexes have their own distinctive verbal and nonverbal ways of expressing themselves, but the lingering difference no longer celebrated. Instead, it is either lamented on practical grounds or exploited for political purposes. What happened? After the civil rights movement in the United States and the dismantling of the apartheid in South Africa, few would declare, at least publicly, that racial segregation under the heading in the United States of separate but equal had to be a good thing, even if it could be argued that separation were morally acceptable, which it is highly debatable. The fact remains that in both cases had failed to provide equality. In fact, though not in theory, the races had been separate but unequal. And many have argued that racial inequality is inherent in the whole notion of racial segregation because of its focus on the differences between whites and blacks. Early feminists were drawn to the rhetoric of integration, which had been popularized by the civil rights movement. They tried to focus on what made women like men, which would justify their integration into the public sphere, not on what made them different, which had been used to justify their segregation in the domestic sphere. By the 1980s, however, women were increasingly preoccupied with their identity, with what made them different from men, and allegedly justified some degree of separation from men. A great deal has been said since then about the lack of communication between men and women, about their differences. I've only got a few seconds.
Okay, that was a lot. I mean, here's the thing. Since I have the final argument, I'm just going to say what I need to say. Essentially, I think that there are a lot of arguments, and I think that people have a general idea of feminism that is perceived by media personalities like Lena Dunham, for example, that don't accurately represent what feminism should be about, or the ideal of feminism. Often feminism is seen as something that is hating men. That's, we want equality, we want to break the wage gap, which is all certainly true. However, there are a ton of other issues that go beyond what is popularized by the media that intersectional feminism represents, that are certainly not outdated, and also don't focus on men at all. Because I feel like a lot of these debates or arguments are, this is what happens to women versus this is what happens to men. But there are some just concrete facts that can't be erased. Like, 20 or over 120 countries in the world still allow child marriages. Around 20,000 women are killed for honor killings every year. 29 countries still allow female genital mutilation. And even in the US, there are still issues. There are 20% of women have the seats in Congress. However, they make up more than half of the population. This is pure inequality. That's undeniable inequality. It's not, I want more women to be in Congress than men. It's that I want equal amounts of men and women holding these positions. I want equal amount of men and women CEOs. That's not anything about hating men. That's about wanting something that is completely justified and that women have been fighting for in different spheres in different parts of the world, for centuries. It doesn't just stop at being a suffragette, and it doesn't just stop at winning the vote. And also, like, the people who are supporting like LGBT men, trans men, they're not cisgender men. They're women. Because that's what the movement's about. It's about equality. It's about making a safe space for everyone. So yeah, that's my argument.